I have a vivid memory of 3rd grade. The year was 1989. I was sick at school, so my dad swung by to get me. When I hopped into the car, he said, "Are you too sick to play this?" and pulled out this copy of Test Drive 2: The Duel. At the time, Test Drive 1 was my favorite racing game outside of the arcade. I have to admit I got unsick pretty quick in that moment. So now that that's out of the way, I will try to take off the nostalgia glasses for the rest of the review.
Accolade presents The Duel Test Drive 2.
Listen to that sultry voice, and look at that cursive font, and those smooth synthesizer tones. Yeah, this game could only have come from one decade, the 1980s. So, if you don't know the Test Drive series, its formula is similar to later series such as Need for Speed. You drive expensive and exotic sports cars down a highway while evading cops. The first Test Drive was a breakthrough in 1987 when it was released, and it was a major step in a new direction away from pure arcade racers like Outrun, which really made up the majority of racers at home. And it wasn't a simulation either. It was somewhere in between. This semi-sim style of racing can be seen reflected in games to this day, though of course it was bound to happen with or without Test Drive's nudge. But although the premise is similar to current racing games, the gameplay hasn't quite been duplicated elsewhere, in part because of the game's slow frame rate. It's more tactics than it is twitch. Every second of the game, you're weighing decisions in your head. Is it safe to pass? Can I squeeze in between these two cars? Do I have an out in case there's unexpected traffic? And then you've got the legendary Fuzzbuster to detect if cops are near and plan accordingly. For example, you can slow down when you hear the Fuzzbuster. The cops will still pursue your opponent though if they then go blazing past the same speed trap, leaving you scot-free. The same principle goes for tricky stretches of road that have a lot of traffic. Just because your opponent passes you doesn't mean that they then won't crash. So that's something you can take advantage of. There are other hazards to contend with as well. If you're not careful, you can blow your engine. You can also break one of your transmission gears by driving straight through a bunch of rocks. Like this. Yup, I broke my 3rd gear by driving over the shoulder at 150 miles an hour. That's why the 3rd gear just revs when you go into it. The game is quite strategic, and oftentimes crashing happens not because of bad coordination, but because of a bad decision. Yeah, that curve said 30 miles an hour, man. The game also has a sense of humor. I love the different gas station names in between the levels. Check this out. Brad Baby's Gas Bistro. And let's see some other ones. Cue the montage. You can also have stuff happen like this. Yup, you read that right. You are dead, but you won the game. Lucky you. One thing that's both great and annoying about Test Drive 2 is that it supports expansion discs. Like DLC today, it's great because it means the game that ships will have more tracks and cars in the future. But it's bad because it's also tempting for a company to then use this to skimp on what they give you in the box. For example, the game only comes with 2 cars. 2! Even the original test drive game from 2 years prior to this came with a full roster of 5 cars. Even when I was young, it struck me as a bit greedy to make you buy the Supercars expansion disc to get a decent automobile selection. So why would anyone spring for more cars? What bearing do they really have on the gameplay? Well, it turns out that the cars in Test Drive 2 are really nicely modeled for the time. In addition to new graphics and engine noises, each car has a different power curve, different gearing, and of course the steering ability and top speed varies considerably as well. Some of the cars even feature a digital readout instead of dials. There's even a muscle cars pack that has machines with old school wood paneling inside. There are also multiple routes possible via these expansions. Where the original Test Drive only came with the one route, Test Drive 2 has 2 expansion discs in addition to the one built in. And one of the best ways to play Test Drive 2 is with this California Challenge disc. In California Challenge, you drive from Crescent City down to the Mexican border. All different kinds of terrain in between are represented nicely, which is one of the great strengths of Test Drive 2's graphics engine when compared to many home racers of the time. Sure, it chugs along at somewhere around 7 frames per second, but it partially makes up for it with the variety of scenery that it can draw. There are cliffs you can fall off of, mountain walls to smash into, all kinds of trees and redwood forests to wreck your car on, hills and valleys to break your transmission with, tunnels, passing lanes, all modeled with attractive 2D pixel work. In this sense, it's one of the more impressive sprite-based driving games, despite its laughably sluggish frame rate. And because the graphics are so slow, they give you a blue dot on the steering wheel that shows how far you've turned it. This updates a lot faster than the scenery does, so keep an eye on it to avoid oversteering. It takes some getting used to, but with a little bit of practice you'll be weaving in and out of traffic like a pro. A pro what? I don't know, but a pro. Now let's take a quick peek at the DOS version. The DOS one has a slightly improved frame rate up to about 11 frames a second from around 7, though it's possible I guess that you could get that out of a faster Amiga. I haven't really tried it yet, so let me know if that's the case. Anyway, it's only 16 colors, and it's missing some important graphical details. This version also misses all the great audio work from the Amiga version. As you can hear, it's only PC speaker blips. Which, given that it's a 1989 PC game, is kind of baffling. But there you are. Now let's watch as I fly off the cliff trying to avoid the police. Speaking of sound, I have to mention the sound design in the Amiga version because it's incredible. They kept the cabin's road noise separate from the engine roar so that the engine could fade in and out. This really gives a great impression of being in the driver's seat. And each car has its own distinct sounds and engine revs. The game even has sound effects for the bots dots. Those are those bumps in the middle of the road that stick up and go ka-thump ka-thump as you go over them. And the crunching collision sound they use for the car crashes does the job perfectly. I'm sure that's a stock sound effect, I'm sure they didn't go and crash a Ferrari so that they could sample it, but nevertheless, it's a good pick. There are other details such as the blips of the fuzzbuster, and let's not forget that satisfying peeling out sound. All of this makes the Amiga version the definitive Test Drive 2. I should also quickly mention the Genesis version. It's not bad, it features different courses which are okay, and it's a bit smoother than the Amiga one, but it introduces a skid maneuver which makes it far too easy to get out of any jam. I really think that's a game-breaking addition. But the worst part about the Genesis one? There's no California Challenge or European Challenge, and those are some of the best things about Test Drive 2. There's also ports to many other systems like the Apple IIgs, Macintosh, Atari ST, and Commodore 64, although I haven't seen any of those in person. So I don't know if they're any good or not. If you do have a favorite version of Test Drive 2, please post in the comments below. that pretty much sums up Test Drive 2. While the gameplay is a bit creaky, it still has enough going on for it that other games haven't covered much. Ducking in and out of traffic and passing on 2-lane mountain passes has never been so satisfying, and the police chases are a genuine thrill. Because there's nothing exactly like it, it's still a fun play, even in 2015. This was Cool and Unusual Games, and I'm doing Amiga reviews all this month. Thanks for watching.